Good afternoon, Tom Ginn. Elevate Your Profits. Today, I'm excited to interview somebody that's going to make a difference in anybody that's in business out there in their marketing. Um, he was introduced to me from another business colleague, and I said I'd love to interview him. And today, we're in for a treat. Uh, so, my guest today is Guy Powell. Welcome, Guy. How you doing?
Tom, I'm doing great, and thank you for having me, and look forward to talking with you further here.
Well, really would like to do is just say thanks for being here, taking time out of your business day. And I know you're going to have a very powerful message. But before we get into that, I just want to make sure anybody that's watching here on the replay that you tag and share this out here with your business colleagues and friends, because we never know what people are seeking to have more success in their business. Elevate Your Profits was established to help solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, small businesses bring a format of good quality people that have success in business to share those secrets or their secret sauce. And Guy has that type of story. So I want to make sure everybody is tagging and sharing this information out there and that's scrolling out there. But Guy, I'd really like to just start with this. What are you grateful for? And then we'll get into your story.
Yeah, thank you. And one of the things that I always think about is what happens if you lose your health, if you're laid up, and recently, of course, with COVID, as being potentially in ICU for a short or even a longer time. And I will admit, I am so grateful that I have my health, and that and my wife and our kids have all been very healthy for the last couple of years and continue to be. And you can't beat it. Nothing better than having good health.
That's so relevant in business because people make so much investments in processes and coaching and systems and whatever, and many times they neglect their health. And I think that's a business principle that should be covered. How do you take care of self-care for yourself? Because if you get under the weather or have something chronic jump up, it can affect how you do your business. So thank you for sharing that, because that's a principle I think a lot of business people aren't applying in their business strategy, is the health strategy. So
yeah, and I think we're all guilty of work-life balance challenges, especially as a solopreneur or an entrepreneur, and being able to really put things into perspective and not overdoing it too much, or when you have to overdo it, just make sure you can still recover and focus still on on the most important thing, which is your health.
Yeah. So I'd just like to move to this. I always like to just have you just share your why, your story, and then we'll dive a little bit into your book and cover some of the principles that you want to share with the audience today about your book. So, Guy, it's all yours, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I've been in marketing now for, I don't know, a long time, maybe 30 years, maybe even a little longer than that. And I was working for a company, high tech. I was the VP of marketing, the global VP of marketing, and we were selling both to businesses as well as to consumers. And in marketing, one of the things you always want to do is you want to spend more. And having more money to spend is more fun, right? I mean, that's kind of what your job is about in marketing, is to get the message out and generate demand. So I was working with my team, and we spent a day or two just in multi-hour meetings a couple times a day, and finally we thought we had a real plan, and then we had a stretch plan, and then we had a kind of a stretch plan. And I said, all right, well, let me see what happens. And so, I went to the CEO, and we were talking, and I said, what we'd like to do is we'd like to get this year, a couple more $1 million. And because we've got some really cool things that we can do. And I will never forget what he said to me. He says, Guy, why would I spend any more money on marketing when I can just hire more salespeople? Well, that just stabbed me right in the heart, because here I am, I'm in marketing. We're supposed to help the company grow sales. And he's basically saying, that the sales team is more important than me. And so that right there was the impetus for probably 4 or 5 books now. I guess it's 5 now. And then this latest one, Post-COVID Marketing Machine, with the idea is how do you make marketing to be provably successful? And you talk about, your audience trying to learn little nuggets so that they can be more successful. Well, in my case, it's the marketing function, and marketing is critical, however you want to define it for your organization. And so one of the things that I learned very quickly was, and I think this is also something that can help out, folks in your audience, is measurement. And, so you have to start measuring. And so when he stabbed me in the heart, that was basically the first thing I did. I said, okay, well, what do we need to do to prove that my efforts are actually successful, that what we're doing and what my team is doing is actually driving the needle and delivering an ROI? If we're not delivering an ROI, then, why even waste $1 on us, let alone a handful of millions? And so the hardest thing was to actually get control in the accounting system of what was actually being spent with the company on marketing. And it took me probably 6 months to get that under control. And then the second thing was, okay, well, we're spending money. So where is all that money going? What's it doing? What are we trying to achieve? Now, unfortunately, and like a lot of small businesses, you have a long sales cycle. And so what that means is, you might do some marketing today, and maybe 6 months or 9 months later, you might be able to close a deal that came off of that marketing. And so one of the things that we instituted once I got the accounting in line was to start measuring. And if you're a small business or an entrepreneur or whatever it is, you have to start measuring in a consistent way, and do it every day, every week, whatever the right cadence is, and just start measuring what you believe are the most important things in marketing. Don't worry about it if they're not correct. You'll fix them because you're smart. That's why you're an entrepreneur. You'll fix them as you're going along. But the key thing is to measure in a very consistent way. And that story really drove what I'm doing now. And now, of course, I'm not working for, that business anymore. I'm now on my own, and we do analytics and consulting. And what we count on is really important and valid data, which represents measurement. And we use that to now drive analytics and consulting and really make the best strategic decisions that we can for our clients that are relatively large advertisers. So we've done work with, for example, Aflac, and they did some work one day. They came to us and said, hey, we want to do a Super Bowl commercial. We need to know what you think how well it's going to produce. So predict in the future. Give us your first best estimate on that Monday morning, right after the Super Bowl, and give us what you can. And then, 6 weeks later, we gave them a final, breakdown of exactly how well it went. And, so it's those kinds of questions. When you're about to, put down a couple million on an ad, you have to know your job is on the line, your team's job is on the line. If you can prove how well it's doing, or you can then improve it based on what you learned from that measurement. And that's what it's all about. That's what I've been doing for the last 20 or 30 years.
Well, you said something that I have experienced pretty much the same thing, but I was a regional sales manager for a company in the Southwest and 4-state territory. And being a sales manager or sales leader, a VP of the sales, we used to get the accounting thing, and it probably runs parallel. They probably had the same conversation with the owner of the company about the revenue being spent as the bean counters, I call them. Why do we want to spend money in those areas? So I've experienced as running a sales organization, and I know that conversation with marketing, but 30 years in the marketing arena, that's impressive. And I think there's a lot of misconception. There's been some changes, trends today. What have you seen? And then we'll dive a bit more pointed on your book and stuff. But what have you seen in marketing, and what would you say somebody why they should have a marketing strategy? What type of marketing would you recommend? Because there's so many things out there that you can plug in. How do you help a business owner identify what might be the best channels to market?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's difficult. One of the things over the time I've been in marketing now is that marketing is changing. I mean, everybody says technology is changing. Well, marketing is changing, and the pace of change is not just not just staying the same and being fast. It's accelerating. The amount of change that's going on in technology and marketing is enormous. In most companies, the investment that marketing makes in technology is larger than the investment that the rest of the company makes in technology. Today, all of these things that you can do, whether it's now with TikTok or Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts, all of those things are just coming at marketers like crazy. And one of the challenges that really hits an entrepreneur is, well, what do I do? I mean, all this stuff is changing. Which one do I do? And it's not an easy decision. Going back even 5 years, going back 10 years, the same problem marketers and entrepreneurs had then as well. So, well, what do I do now? Is an email going to work? Should I do direct mail? Should I do this? Should I do that? And one of the critical things is that you have to really start to test and use that testing and continually test, not just measurement, like I said before, but now also run tests. And based on those tests, if you can, try out an email test, try a direct mail, try a TikTok, try a YouTube, try a this, try a that, and start to see what kind of things are delivering some kind of an increase in your responses. And that's then where now what I talked about originally is just set up a consistent method to measure so that you can start to see those changes. And then based on those tests, find the one that you really want to invest in, and then move on from there.
It was shared with me a while back. I'm in business for a long time, and if I've dealt with a wide range of marketing strategies and business strategies and sales strategy. And this was told to me in saying that only one strategy of marketing doesn't work. You've got to have many strategies so that they work like a mesh, that one feeds the other. So do you see that as an accurate statement, that you've got to
Uh,
have your strategy, maybe three or four strategies, you may have two strategies, but they've got to integrate some way. In with today's technology, it's probably even easier to do and
well, I'd
monitor.
like to correct your maybe not correct, but adjust your definition of strategy. One of the things that I found, and I remember when I was a product manager, brand manager for a high-tech company, and we were constantly talking about, man, we need a new marketing strategy. Man, we need a new this strategy. Man, we need to do that strategy. Well, strategy is not something that you need every day. Strategy should be like 2, 3, 5 years out and should not change. And you should only have one strategy. Now, what happens though is there's a lot of confusion in terms of what that strategy is and the definition of the strategy. So one of the things that we always did was right about now, August, September, October, was start to put together an annual plan. I remember when a young marketer, I'd say, oh, we got to do our annual strategy. No, that's not an annual strategy. The strategy is, where do you want to be 3 or 4 years from now, and how are you going to get there? The annual plan is just one step. And then, of course, you have tactics. And I remember I was doing some training with a company out in California on marketing ROI and marketing effectiveness and basically all the stuff that's in my book. And I'm out there and we're talking about exactly this: is what is the definition of tactics versus strategy? And one of the guys in the back room, he goes, well, it's tactigy, or is it stratactics? And I'll never forget that, because it's really, really true. So it really depends on what you're using as the definition of strategy. And I think that the definition that I like to use for strategy is, how are you going to get from here to 3 to 5 years out, what your goal is 3 to 5 years from now. Everything else is a tactic or an annual plan or something else. It's not a strategy, based on how I would define that.
And the methodologies you would use, whether it be direct
Yeah.
mail, whether it be
Yeah.
social,
Yeah.
radio,
Those are all
TV.
tactics. Those are all
Yeah.
tactics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for clearing, because I think I coming from that same thinking, as a business person, what's the strategy? The strategy is really the end result, and what you just did is clarified that. So I think that's a great point that you brought up.
Yeah, and I think to your other point, though, which I think is also that was kind of implied in what you were saying, is if you think about Eisenhower and his thing was planning is everything, plans are nothing, right? It's the whole planning process. And when you're going to take that hill, or you're going to take Western Europe, and you're going to invade on D-Day, your plans change as soon as you as soon as you hit the road, as soon as you put the guys in the water, the men in the water. All of that is now changed. And so planning is everything. And I think that's really where you were going, is being able to have a plan that is not only in line with your strategy, but based on reacting to what might happen in the marketplace, in his case on the battlefield, but in the marketplace, because when you do something, your competition is going to respond. When they do something, you've got to respond. And so if you're going to have a series of tactics and a series of plans, those have to be flexible enough to be able to do that. And I also have in one of my earlier books, I talk about that a lot, because that is something I think that marketers don't do, is they have one set of tactics or one annual plan, and they don't look at the change often enough. So just as another story, if you're a CMO, and this happened with one of our clients, and you only change your plan once every 6 months, and if you have a typical tenure of 24 months, it means I only get 4 changes. Well, the first 6 months when you're a new CMO, you're inheriting the guy that was just fired. So that plan is already bad. That gives you only 3 tries to actually make a difference. And then the first one is probably going to be okay, but may not be that great, because you're only learning from the bad stuff. You're not learning from the good stuff. So now the second plan really isn't that good. That gives you only 2 real tries to be able to keep your job past 24 months. And that right there, I think, is an eye-opener for a lot of CMOs when they first start with a company, and realizing that they have to be so fast and be able to get feedback right away. They can't wait 6 months. They got to wait. It's got to be 1 week, 30 days, 1 quarter, and 6 months, and a year. And that rolling planning process is what's critical to their thinking. You can't have a rigid plan, and especially one that has a cadence of every 6 months.
Okay, well, great. So that's going to lead a little bit into your book. Now, you've written how many books now? Did you say?
I think it's 5. I think this one is my 6th. I can't. After a while, you don't remember. And I've got a couple of other fiction books. But anyway, my latest book is called The Post-COVID Marketing Machine, and it kind of relies on all of the previous books and a lot of the training that I've done. In that, what you want to be able to do is, as a marketer and as a businessman, you want to be able to put in dollars and get sales out. If I put in dollars and I'm not getting something out of a machine, and I can't predict what I'm going to get, and I can't rely on what I'm going to get, then I have not built a valid marketing machine. And so that's kind of the concept of the marketing machine piece, number one. But then number two, how do you respond to a huge shock in the system? And that's where the post-COVID marketing machine book comes from, is then really learning from a lot of different case studies and interviews that we did with senior marketers across the country to see how they responded. One of the stories I thought was great was with Georgia Aquarium. We spoke with the VP of marketing there. And as you can imagine, COVID hits and they had to close their doors. And so what do? And they were very quick to start building online assets, online engagement, online capabilities, and then also improving their whole wait time and then the appointment setting, so that when you came, you had a specific appointment as to when you could enter, and it totally changed their business. And so there's a handful of case studies in there that I think any of the readers would find very interesting in terms of how they can really build for the future based on what happened to us with the COVID and pandemic.
I have a question for you. The COVID situation affected so many segments of business, and very negative ways, but at the same time, it also improves some things as well. It causes people to rethink things, and that I don't believe there's a new normal. I think we're always adjusting, no matter what goes on, whether it be political things that go on that affect businesses or environmental or all those things. And of course, we had the COVID. But what did you see when COVID came in? How it affected marketing? What are some of the things that you saw?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing is, and one of the things that I think marketers get wrong quite a bit is marketers quite often focus in on the what's called the media channel. They focus in on what I'm going to do on TV. They focus in on what I'm going to do on digital, and that right there is all wrong. They have to understand how and what their consumer is doing. So they have to understand consumer behavior. And so in my book, Post-COVID Marketing Machine, I have 3 dimensions of how consumer behavior changed. The first one is all about how did consumer purchase behavior change? How did they go buying things? Now, you could argue that buying online was already in process, but it certainly wasn't in process for the boomers and potentially the Gen X's. I remember sitting here right at my desk right now, and I said, I need something, and I need it really pretty fast. And so I closed my laptop and I got in the car and I got to the top of the hill and I said, wait a minute, what am I doing? Why am I going to the store? I'm just going to go back and I'm going to order it online, and they'll deliver it either maybe by the end of the day, but definitely by tomorrow morning. And so right there, my purchase behavior changed. And now I'm looking for stuff online, and I'm seeing stuff that I wouldn't have seen before. If I'd have gone to the Walmart, I'd see what they have on the shelf. When I go to Amazon or eBay or whatever it is, I see what they have on the shelf, and it's actually a wider selection. So consumer purchase behavior changed in a big way. We really started doing things online. The second thing is our media behavior, our media consumption behavior changed. And the media consumption behavior would be, well, hey, I'm going to now subscribe to Netflix or Hulu or one of those, and I'm going to binge watch whatever it is. I'm going to binge watch Ted Lasso, or I'm going to binge watch, whatever show you want. And I'm going to binge watch it potentially where I'm not even seeing any advertising. And so now all of a sudden the marketers have to respond to that and say, wait a minute, they're not seeing my ads. I'm buying all these ads and nobody's seeing them. So they had to swiftly change. And I remember talking to a woman at one of the larger cable companies, and she said, we were running around with our heads cut off. Those first couple of weeks, we had to cancel all of our sports advertising. We canceled basically everything, stepped back, and then started to relook at how and where people were consuming media. And then they started to buy media again. Then the last one is how do consumers respond to media? I don't know about you, but I used to not do it as much as I do now. But I'm sitting in front of the TV, and I've got my laptop out, and I'm generally working on something, whatever it is, just kind of goofing around. And so here I am now consuming my media very differently than I was before. I'm now distracted. And so I'm now going to do things differently. So my wife and I, during COVID, we bought a new car. We went out to a couple of the different dealerships, and then we came home and we started to search online. And my wife says, "Oh, do that in hidden mode there. Don't do it because you'll just get all these ads." And I said, "No. Let's see what happens." So we went out to Kia.com and Hyundai.com and GM.com and Ford.com and whatever. And I was expecting to be inundated with ads. And I was also expecting, as a marketer, that I would start to see on TV Hyundai ads, Kia ads, GM and Ford ads. The only ones that I saw were Hyundai. They were the only ones that actually responded to my search on here within 24 hours, showing the ads for the SUVs that we were looking for. None of the other brands did. And I was actually really surprised at what happened there. So that kind of is a marketing response to our media behavior and our consumption behavior and information gathering behavior. And then the last one of the things that you see is that a lot of the advertisers on TV are now putting QR codes up there. And so now you can basically take a picture of the TV and click right away with your phone into the ad. And so then the media response behavior has changed. So consumer purchase behavior, consumer media consumption behavior, and consumer media response behavior changed in a big way. And I think those are probably almost permanent. There'll be a little bit of wavering in there in different segments, but basically I think those will be pretty permanent.
Those are really great points. But with the COVID in your book, how do you outline that? Is your book designed to help people think through the process, start reevaluating what they're doing? Um, what is why don't you dive a little bit more in the book with how your book is laid out to help that business
Absolutely.
move
Yeah,
forward?
so it's laid out. There's 3 or 4 different components to each chapter. The first thing is case studies. So we talked to a couple of larger marketers about a specific point, and then we wrote up their case studies so that you can kind of understand what their challenges were. Then we go into some theories on how to fix that, or how to respond to that, and here are then how you can build a machine based on those things. And then the last piece is, which I think is just critical, is a summary at the end, or what are the key takeaways. And so you have then the challenge, the story. You have then how you can respond and how you can take advantage of what's going on, or at least respond to what's going on, and then a summary of the key takeaways. And then lastly, the theory of the building a marketing machine is woven throughout. So you have the concept of, hey, I want to put money in, and I want to get sales out in a reliable, predictable, and accountable way. And now I will admit, this is to some extent a companion book to my previous book, which was just called Marketing Machine. That one is a little bit more theoretical and doesn't have as many case studies. This one has a lot more case studies, just because COVID was such a huge shock to the system. So both of the books are really work together to give you kind of the theory of how to build a marketing machine, and now the story, and then how are the best ways to actually go ahead and implement it.
Well, great. And the things you're talking about here would apply to the concepts or the process to create a successful marketing machine. Does it apply for the solopreneur or a small business guy that has maybe 2 to 3 salespeople, or a small operation? Do these things work the same way? The same process?
Yeah, very much so. The concepts certainly do, and the only difference is the amount of money that you're spending, and then the accuracy of the measurement. You just as a bigger company, you can pay for and afford a lot more data sets and things like that. But that's where my first point came up early on in the conversation, is how important it is to start to measure, and measure in a consistent way, those things that you believe are going to be important as success factors for your marketing, and then just start measuring it. And one of the things I like to bring up, and I bring it up in my in all of my training sessions, I call it Tinstoffel. There is no such thing as a free lunch. I think a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of smaller businessmen think that, marketing, and measurement, that's all free. No. If you want to be successful, you have to pay for measurement. Doesn't mean it's a lot of money, but you have to pay it in terms of your time, the entrepreneur's time. He has to actually think about what he needs to measure. And then, okay, so I might have to pay something on Google Analytics, or I might have to hire somebody part-time to be able to start collecting that data. But I absolutely have to invest management time and brain power, people time, and then potentially some software time to be able to really get that. There is no such thing as a free lunch. And measurement, and I don't know, from some of your other episodes, I'm sure you've had it in there. If you're not measuring, then you are not going to, you're going to be lucky if you can get success and build on that success. If you measure, you're going to be much more likely, with a much higher probability of being successful.
And that's a great point. As a small entrepreneur like myself, I've used a lot of different mediums to market in the past, and there was no measurement back in the day I was using, or I wasn't aware of it. Wasn't properly schooled or brought to that But over time, I've really scaled down what I do in marketing, and I only use three different things. And I know exactly what my click rate is. I know when somebody opens an email, I know when somebody clicks on a link. That's data that is tracked. And I go, my gosh, what I said is giving me a result. So even a small guy, there's no matter what you're using in your marketing, if you don't have it tied with some sort of analytics, it's changed everything what I do in my business. And the next thing is I use some things that for a lot of small business don't use. I use direct mail, and with a platform, I can do one-offs. I can do some things, and not in the same protocol that a company would use a big direct mail campaign with. But what I found out, which is measurable, who shows up to my workshop and who calls on the phone.
Yep.
I track that. So for every 3 to 500 I put out, gee, I got 20 people come to a seminar, and I, of course, then the conversion all the way down to selling a product, service, or whatever I'm doing. So even the simplest things got to be trackable. And
Yeah,
I've really
absolutely.
scaled my marketing down because I was doing a lot of things that was just a waste of my time and money. And over time, I've tested and I've narrowed it down. So uh, and I can scale it. That's the key, I think,
Hmm.
in your marketing. So, what do you see it for? Let's start with a small entrepreneur. What would be? You're sitting down with me the first time, and I want to have an effective um, marketing strategy. What would the conversation look like? And then we can move maybe to a little bigger organization, all the way up to a corporate entity that has a whole different objective. Um, what
Yeah.
would that conversation look like?
Sure. Well, the first thing would be is to understand who their customer is. Who is the person that's actually buying their stuff? If they're selling B2B, typically there is a purchase committee, as it may be called. There's a purchase committee. There's maybe the line person that's going to use the product. There's a purchasing person. There's a finance person, and then maybe there's for software, there might be a security and IT security person. And so all 4 or 5 or 10 or 50 of those people are the purchase committee. And if that's the purchase committee, then we want to understand a lot more about who those people are and what they look like. And in particular, then what do they, are they younger, or are they older? Are they millennials, or are they, Gen Xers, or are they boomers? And then where can you actually reach each and every one of those? What's the best way to reach them? And I think that right there is a big it can be a really big help for small businesses and even large businesses. We did some work with AT&T in Asia, and they were just shotgunning everything. And one of the things that we helped them with is they had a small sales force in each of the countries. And what we helped them with is how to determine who is on their purchase committee, and then what kind of relationships do we have with each of the people that are probably on there? Do we even know who they are? And so then we defined then what those positions were for them. And then we said, okay, well, who do we know at your target companies? Come up with a list of 100 companies. Let's say they're your targets. And then who do you know in each one of those? And then, okay, well, you don't know anybody. So how do we start with the first approach there? Who is it that we want to go after, and start to then build out our network within the company? And depending upon what they're doing, that could be that could be LinkedIn. If it's B2B, LinkedIn is just an awesome piece of technology. LinkedIn is maybe one way to start to build those relationships, and then come up with different activities that will help the sales team to build relationships within the purchase committee, within their target customers. And that works for the solopreneur or the entrepreneur and any of the small businesses selling B2B. On a consumer business, that's a little bit different. Be glad to talk about that, but I don't know if you had any questions on what I just mentioned there.
No, it's pretty clear. So knowing who's going to make the decisions in an organization, you got to know all the players and where to start and build that relationship so it goes upstream. I guess best way to put it. So that's great advice. Whether I'm selling B2B uh, any product or service I've done in the past, knowing who's the team that makes the decision, because
Exactly.
there's usually a committee that makes the decision.
Yeah,
So
and there's usually, there's a champion that really wants you. There's an influencer, and then there's the naysayers, and there's a handful of really good books in terms of how to define that and look through the how you can determine how the personalities are mixing and matching, and then really their marketing is to support the sales team to help them engage on a longer time period with those people that are on that purchase committee.
great stuff. So, what else about your book that would be great information for people to basically have a understanding when they get the book what it will do for them? What's the outcome that they can expect if they not just read it but study it and apply it?
Yeah, absolutely. We have built, and this is probably just one example that I think is really pretty good. We've been working with a financial services company for the last 5 years. They were a spin-off from a Fortune 500. They themselves are a Fortune 500. And we built a marketing machine for them. And we have easily generated for them about $1 billion, $250 million in sales over the last 5 years per year. So a billion, just over $1 billion now. Now that we're in our 5th year, so we're coming up on $1.5 billion in our 6th year. For another company, they sold cheese, aged cheese over in Holland, of all things. And there we helped them to increase their media budgets from by about 50% and increase their sales by about 30%. And so an enormous opportunity by building a machine that takes in what we did, what was the response, how did it affect the sales in the marketplace, and then feeding that back in so that we're investing more in the good stuff, investing less in the less good stuff, but always focusing in on how we're generating our target or our objective within our target customer set, so that we're growing sales in their case. Now, we've also worked for some nonprofits and smaller businesses, and it's just a question of how you get that process and that machine going. To your point, is direct mail. I had a friend of mine, and he actually has inspired me. I really want to do this. This is going back maybe 20 years. He bought the billboard on the highway going into downtown, and he sold web development services. And here he is. He's a B2B company. He's got this huge billboard. And I remember talking to him. I said, so, how's that billboard working for you? He said, Guy, that billboard is worth for me $10 million a year in sales. And because so many people are driving past it, and nobody's expecting a web development company to have a billboard. It's kind of like using direct mail when you're trying to sell digital services. Everybody expects you to be online, and here he is doing something totally different. And yet he literally grew his company on that and generated 10 million in sales a year off of that. And he had that billboard up there for probably, 6-8 years. And finally, the billboard owner says, we don't want you on here anymore. We want somebody else. And so then he got kicked off. He didn't want to lose it. He didn't want to lose it. So there's things that can really work, that are different, and where you can really stand out and get the traction that you need.
You said something there very important, that differentiation. You got TV, radio, you got print, you got direct mail, you got the social medias, you got all that. But if you're doing the same thing everybody else is, you're just lost in the wind. So differentiation that might be outside the normal channels. Do you help your clients identify what can we do differently that's out of what everybody else is doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And that billboard, he was a small company. He was maybe 5-10 people when he started doing it. He's now got a couple of hundred. I mean, enormous web developer here in Atlanta. And so by using and when you think about web development services, there are probably 1,000 different companies in the US that can do exactly that. And so how do you differentiate yourself? Yeah, if not more. And so he differentiated himself based on where the message was being seen. Some of our clients have done some very interesting things as well, where they did what's called an airport takeover. So they took over and did all the signage within an airport. And it worked out great for them because nobody else in their industry was going to be in there. So they were able to deliver their message in a highly differentiated way where the competition, either couldn't or wouldn't do that. And they saw some major success because of what they did. And so then that differentiation not only applies on the brand or on the product side, but also applies to where you place and how you place your message.
So this is something for you that, a lot of people, you hear this, and in a small business person, especially in sales, and a salesperson's got an independent entrepreneur, a salesperson, he's got to understand a little bit about marketing to get his message out, uniqueness and differentiation. But when it comes to marketing, let's break it down to the small business, then look at the bigger side. It's all about the number of impressions or touches you can give your audience. On a small person, what do you know about those numbers? Would you tell a small business person or an entrepreneur in their marketing strategy, the frequency before you get a response? Is there tracking numbers on that?
Well, there are, and I usually don't talk about benchmarks because it's not really it's nice to know. It kind of makes you feel good, but it doesn't necessarily ring the cash register. For small business, one of the key things is, especially for an entrepreneur or a solopreneur, is how do you get people that don't even know that you exist to get them to know that you exist? And I have consulted over the years with a handful of actually quite a few different small businesses, and I would talk about what I call the 10, 100, 1,000 plan. And the plan is, how do you sell your first 10 customers? Work on selling your first 10 customers. Once you've got those first 10, how do I now amplify that, magnify that so that I can get 100? Now you got 100. How do I get to 1,000? Now you got 1,000. How do I get to 10,000? And focus in on not trying to boil the ocean, not trying to do everything, but how do I get those first 10? And I don't know if you remember, but the concept kind of comes from Jeffrey Moore, his Crossing the Chasm book. It's a long time ago, but it is an awesome book. And what he talked about were bowling pins. Get that first bowling pin, those first 10 customers. Maybe those customers are all retailers or they're restaurant owners or they're something else. Get those first 10 customers and learn and really figure out exactly how you got them. And then now, once you get 10, is figure out how you can transfer it so you can get another 90, either similar restaurants or retailers, or maybe you go after a different bowling pin. And the idea, though, is to get those first 10 and figure out how you can get them and work towards that, and then start to try and multiply that.
Great. Scalability. How can you scale that model
Yeah.
up?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I'm going to put something up. I want everybody to see the cover of your book. So I'm going to put this over here on us. There you go. So they have a chance to see that. And that's your book.
That is it.
And
Marketing
they can get your
Machine.
book on that banner below, correct?
Yep, marketingmachine.prorelevant.com. And actually, the first chapter is there. You can download it and get a feel for how the book is written and see where the whole process is going.
Wonderful. And what we're doing with the book is of course bringing people a different level of awareness. COVID definitely changed a lot of things in business in many respects. So who's your ideal client that you want to speak to on a personal basis so that people know that this is who you want to have that conversation about, helping them improve their business bottom line through marketing?
We're probably mid-sized to larger businesses. So those companies that have maybe 5 million or so in media, they're spending 5 million up to about 150 million a year. And the people we want to talk to within there are typically either the CMO and or the VP of marketing, slightly different. depending upon how they're organized. Typically there's like a VP of marketing operations, the one that kind of takes care of the nuts and bolts of the whole marketing team. And any one of those three is kind of our target. But the company themselves is anybody advertising somewhere between about 5 million and 150 million.
Okay. And I do have two questions. What's happening in the space of radio and TV? Do you see anything changing in those spaces? Because we got social
Huge.
media, we've got all these different avenues of digital messaging. What's happening in those two spaces?
Yeah, definitely huge. And yeah, radio. What's fascinating too, even newspaper is another one. Is the What's happened is that everybody is now advertising online, and so the equivalent of radio is what's called digital audio. So a podcast is kind of a digital audio. TV, what's called linear TV, what used to be called broadcast TV, linear TV is now called connected TV. So connected TV would be a smart TV. Most folks nowadays have smart TVs where you're connecting your TV through the internet. And what's happened is that the investments being made in TV, linear TV, in what's called terrestrial radio, over the airwaves radio, all of those have gone down. It's gone down in newspapers, and that's why you see all the newspapers closing. And so the investments on those have gone down, and the investments in digital has gone up. But what's happened, and we've seen this with a couple of clients, those media channels now are actually becoming more effective. So when you said you're doing direct mail, I applaud you, because that now has become very effective. Now, of course, there were some challenges with direct mail during COVID, but nevertheless, those traditional channels, so linear TV, terrestrial radio, direct mail, magazines, a newspaper, the printed magazine, the investments on those have gone down so much so that now when people start to invest in them, they actually get a pretty good return on it. And we've seen those start to really take off for a handful of our customers.
Well, that's a great point. Don't discount it, because now you put you in a differentiation. You're still out there in medium.
Yep.
That there's still a lot of people who are going to have their magazines in their newspaper, and they're going to listen to their radios, and they're going to watch the linear TV. So yeah, it's just staying relevant to know who your audience is. I guess where do they get their information is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And then of course, testing it. You shouldn't necessarily discount or count something in because it's the new thing. You have to really test it. You want to absolutely test it. And one of our biggest clients, before they actually embark on a new media channel, they will spend about 6 months testing it, and just to make sure that it actually works. And then once they've got it proven, and we help them to measure that, once they've got it proven, then they take that bowling pin on the media side. They take that bowling pin and start to amplify it and magnify it over the next period.
Wonderful. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Marketing is an art as well as a science, as I would look at it. And you've had 30 years of experience in seeing all the transitions, and you'll starting to see the new trend. I'm sure you're aware of some of the new transitions that are coming down the pipe. And I'd just like you to, close out our conversation today. Number one, what would be the closing message you want to leave any business person out there, whether you're the CEO of a company or that solopreneur out there? What would you recommend they have the right mindset on marketing? What would that be?
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of mentioned one thing which I also like. Marketing is an art and a science. Marketing, however, can be a lot more scientific, and I think a lot of folks don't know how to apply that concept to what they're doing. And I mentioned early on how important measurement is. You would never, ever not measure the amount of cash you have in the bank. And cash is what you're trying to get through your marketing. So if you're not measuring your marketing, why are you measuring your cash? You should be measuring your marketing just as much as you're measuring cash in the bank. And it's just as important. So measurement number one. And then once you've got a rigorous measurement mentality and process going on, then you can start to see how different activities work, whether it's direct mail, like we talked about, whether it's TikTok, or maybe even some of the new stuff with the metaverse coming in. But I think the biggest message, regardless of how big or small you are, is spend money on measurement and invest your time, your management time and brain power, as well as people time where necessary. And then lastly, in buying the right kind of tools and get that measurement done right.
Great advice. Well, Guy, I've really appreciated what you brought to elevate your profits, get people to think differently, look at things differently. Whether you're a solopreneur all the way up to a CEO, making some very significant decisions on getting your business out in the marketplace. So I appreciate that you came on today, took time, and we are going to wrap it up, my friend. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. It's always fun to talk about building a marketing machine.